owner down the road really wants us to do. Sometimes I think librarians need permission to say no because we have so many wonderful people, like I said, with great ideas. It just kind of helped us pull all that in. And they also know that when the library board adopted this strategic plan, they had opportunity to do some tweaking, which we did, based on the thoughts and the skills of the library staff that I had. So I think that created better buy-in.
Joe, I have a question. Can you hear me? This is Ann.
Yes.
I think this is wonderful, but I wonder, are there any parameters for the strategic plans? Do they have to be reviewed by anybody, or just adopted by the board is good? And how often do they have to be updated, or have you tackled that yet?
So that is covered under the state library standards. Libraries have quite a bit of latitude on their strategic plan, and you can actually look over at Tracy here, and she can fill in, because this is not my area of expertise. It's really what our consultants do. So they do. I know that they do have to be approved by their board. Quite a bit of latitude. Is that right, Tracy?
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay,
Tracy's saying
thanks.
that's correct.
Thank you.
You know, I think it's significant that, and somewhat strategic that we chose the library strategic plan as the framework for this, because we know not every library has one, but we think every library should. So this is one way that we thought staff could see the value of that document and would be supportive of creating one, because you can't really you can't embark on this pathway without that strategic plan in place. The other check going forward is that once the library director signs off on a staff person's proposal to enter this pathway, the CE coordinator also has to sign off. So if at that point I had some questions about the validity of that strategic plan, I could go to the consultant and we could go back to that library and say, yeah, this is really not what we had in mind for a strategic plan. Let's work on that. So I hope it'll give us some of those opportunities.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because there are an awful lot of libraries who say, yes, we adopt we have a strategic plan and we adopt it every 3 years, but they don't. So, and you can see when they're 20 years old. So, and then if somebody were to want to do this, then they would have to go back and actually look at their strategic plan. So that could be very motivating.
We're thinking that, yes. Part of our grand scheme, to take over the world. It's diabolical, really.
Any other questions for Joe?
And I see on the agenda, is there any other public comment?
I just want to say I wholeheartedly agree with the fact that the strategic plan needs to be the whole foundation and base of this. I wholeheartedly agree.
Then I move that we adopt the recommendations as in our packet.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Any abstentions?
You're good.
But we
But
have
we're
a
still good.
quorum.
We're
Yeah.
still good.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks,
Thank
Joe.
you, Joe.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing
Now
me
I know
the
what I'm going to be
opportunity
doing for
address
the rest
it.
of the year. Thanks.
Right.
Thanks for swinging
Thank
by.
you for the work that you do. Very
I'm signing off the
forward-thinking.
phone, Jenny.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, well, we will move over to our next guest. Tommy, thank you so much for coming and wading through our business we've done today. We're happy to hear your MLIA grant presentation.
Do you need any technology?
Yeah. Mouse to control PowerPoint.
We don't have a mouse, but we can click.
Okay. Are you connected to the network?
Yes. Like
Because
a share
I
drive?
have PowerPoint.
Okay. Is it on the share drives?
Yeah.
I'm not connected at that level, but I can go there.
Can you connect a flash drive to that?
I can, yeah. That's easier.
All right. This is a guy who's done this before.
We have backups.
17
Backups and
media
backups.
months media.
I embraced my inner nerd about 3 years ago.
Yay.
So I'll just do an introduction. This is Tommy Luksha. He is the GIS coordinator manager for Madison County. And this is his first Montana. Oh, where's Ken?
They'll be back.
This is our first Montana land information, or his first MLIA grant as a project manager. And it's to improve the CAT STI, which I think Maya did a pretty good job of informing everyone how important those updates are back at your meeting in April. And so he's going to talk to you a little bit about this. And he also, would you bring the final report?
Yeah.
If you would, I think he's got enough for everybody to have a copy. And I just want to say thank you to him for coming to present. He's also been a kind of a remarkable grantee. Reports on time, phone calls, and so he is our model.
Tommy, if you just arrow through,
Yep.
is that all right with you?
Yep,
Okay.
most
I'm gonna let
definitely.
you just don't hit one. Or have a seat if you're on the seat.
So this was actually my first ever grant. So there was a lot of appreciation for Montana State Library and the help that they've provided in this pursuit, as there was some drastic concerns with some of the cadastral in Madison County. So basically it was to hire a surveyor and provide data to Montana State Library to improve a certain number of areas in Madison County. The objective was to improve workflows for all involved, as well as the MSDI layers, and basically improve efficiencies. So we covered the data management, digital land information, and the business processes were all a large portion of this. From the county side, it was more geared towards the business processes and the fact that I, at that point, was only a 30-hour employee and needed to improve automation and really get things moving inside my office. So, Pony, this is our problem child, and as a lot of folks have called and asked, where is my property? If you can see, where's the road? If you actually take the data and perform a manual shift, this road still ends up cutting through these properties. And that can have some big implications. So this was kind of our lead, and we need to fix something. And through talking with Montana State Library staff, I found out that the MLIA grant was a good option to repair some of these issues, or potentially repair some of these issues. So Luray, that big blue parcel that you see right in the middle of the town, it's not supposed to be there. It's supposed to be a little bit to the east and a little bit to the north. And this was another major problem area. And you can see that visual assumptions show 178 feet off on some of those parcel boundaries, 86 feet, 95 feet. Causes some problems for automation in basically making sure that your data, your analysis lands in the correct property if I'm looking at a structure.
And the taxes are then paid.
Correct. So Alder also had some significant issues. So Alder and Luray are 2 miles from each other, and that's where these two got lumped in together as kind of one bigger area as compared to the Pony and Harrison area, which are two separate. So the grant process, I maintained everything inside of the Madison County GIS department, and
That's a great picture.
hey, trying to bring a little bit of laughter to this. So. Research research. Basically, I spent a lot of time trying to learn what needed to be done to make this happen. I am self-educated in GIS, and this process was outside of my scope of knowledge, and I have special thanks to the Montana State Library staff and Staley Engineering and others who have helped. Looked at the numbers, put in a little buffer, and ended up coming in a significant portion under budget.
That gold, though, that you had off on the side helped
Yeah.
pay
Yep.
for some of your work. There.
Yep. I had the surveyors, try and find some of that while they were out in the field. So, the trim expenses. I had looked to pursue how to trim down all of the expenses for this, and ended up bringing a lot of the work in-house, so that way I didn't have to pay contractor fees for hours spent in the clerk and recorder's office. So I created some maps, pulled all the documentation together for them, used my GIS budget to make a better savings for the county, increase the savings. So created the SMART goal, got the approvals, commissioners, the grant funding, and the contract, moved that forward into the implementation, selecting the surveyor, the RFPs, and evaluated again. Basically following the cyclic pursuit of improve the processes all the way through. So I'm going for the greatest long-term benefit. That's where I'm hoping to see myself in 10 years, the Little Mountain Goat there. So our pre-grant work basically helped to verify the OR is looking forward to having the improved workflows, the BLM. I mean, the number of people that this grant and this PLSS enhancement is going to benefit is longer than I could even spend time telling you guys today. It's a huge, huge benefit. So, surveyor went out, got mapping control points, basically surveyed township edges, township corners, section corners, and even the quarter corners. So these are some of the pictures that they had taken. I did incorporate some special requests for the surveyor to take north, south, east, west pictures, as well as pictures of the point that they found, to further assist future surveyors and future individuals looking at the long-term prospect on this. So some of the obstacles, there was issues with a lack of understanding of what GIS is and does. My dad actually said it the best. It's kind of like when computers came out. People were afraid of computers. That's kind of how I see GIS. They don't know what it is and how to implement it, and that created some major obstacles. Thankfully, Montana State Library was quite willing to work with me and help move forward and resolve those issues. And education. I started showing my oversight what GIS is, how it can benefit the county, how it can benefit the community, and devoted a little bit more time out of my workflow to educating the oversight that was struggling with understanding how my nerd work is so important, and that helped a lot. So this grant was a success. We found 46 out of the 50 pursued points, and the benefits are going to continue down the road for many years to come. And most importantly, we're going to be saving a lot of time. Saving time is saving money. So with that, do you guys have any questions?
So I'm just curious, in Ponies, did people find they had built a garage in the neighbor's land in the middle of the street?
There's one individual who, after this process and the surveyor had gone through, he contracted a surveyor to come in to figure out where his neighbor's garage was, and yes, it is on his land. The fence actually crosses over his property line. There's a couple of fence lines that are 17 and 22 feet off that causes some neighbor disputes and some other stuff. So with this correction, it'll allow us to move forward towards a more long-term resolution to try and get everybody on the same page and figure out the best course of action for correcting some of the issues. So.
Very cool.
You know Bill Doggett?
Bill's still in the area.
I'm not related to him. He's my husband's uncle. I'm not, there's no relation.
Nice.
Well, that sounds like a relation.
No. I wonder if there's any old lines. Bill Doggett's grandfather was the first white child born in Virginia City in 1863.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Jefferson Davis Doggett.
Huh.
Came from the South.
Huh. I'm surprised.
I'm going to have to go ask Bill about that. Get the full story.
Well, I'm impressed with your pre-grant work
Yeah.
because then your actual report on the grant was and that's really commendable. I mean, good job on that.
Thank you.
Actually, curious what advice you would give other grant recipients. I know the pre-work obviously, but anything that maybe jumps out at you.
Some of the advice that I would give is get a firm, solid plan and make sure that your oversight has a better clue of what GIS is before starting the route. One of the issues that I ran into was I said if I'm going to apply for this, I need to be bumped up to 40 hours. And it wasn't just for this, but it was for an already increased workload. And that lack of time to be able to devote to it caused significant problems. So make sure that the individual department's oversight really has a good firm foundation with the GIS component as well. Try and get everything set up for the surveyor so that way they can hand off the documentation and the surveyor doesn't have to spend a whole lot of time doing the research. The web map, I actually was sharing an ArcMap document with the surveyor so that way they were able to just look at all of my work. In the future I would actually have it set up as a web map in which they could pull the documents including the original BLM GLO plats, etc.
I'm curious about how many more projects are there like this around the state that are left, or that remain to be done? I mean, like a lot, like 1,000, 10,000.
I could, and at the next meeting, we could give you a list of collected versus uncollected.
I don't really need. I'm just curious. Is this so? Like, are we doing this? I get my real question, I suppose.
50 years, 100 years.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a major priority, and
Okay.
and obviously it's a priority of the land plan. It's a priority of the land information plan for our MSDIP leads. So the folks that are taking care of cadastral and map control, but it's also a priority for the grants as well. And I don't ever see that being taken off the table anytime soon. No one else is doing this work as far as we know, except for the Montana State Library. Once in a while you'll see another project come along, but we are working hard to try to collect this information. Well, the BLM is out there collecting, so I take that back. But I'm not sure there's ever been a local government that's gone out and done it themselves for the purposes of improving land information.
And it didn't cause trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got personalities out there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but
You've
the other
been funny.
thing, so there's surveyors out collecting control, and what we're trying to do, and we've made some headway recently with the Forest Service, is get that control, because then it will limit the amount of money we have to spend to try to find that. And so, I mean, Park County, they took a break, but they're on a 10-year long process, and they're on like year between 7 and 8 right now, and so they're still working on theirs. So Lake County had multiple years, and I could see Tommy probably spending more time. We have our problem areas, and there is a map online that we can show you. But yeah, we have our specific, what I want to do, because it's easier for me, is I'm working with Michael and Megan, and I was working with Maya to prioritize those, because that's what that would be easier for me to write a land information plan and award grants if we had priority areas. And so there are areas where we're trying to prioritize, but at the same time, I have to convince the local government that they really need to write a grant. And some people kind of get a little intimidated by that process. And so that's challenging in itself, because like this is the way for you to improve the data here, but some people aren't interested in going through that process yet.
So do you feel there's ways that the state library can make the part of the process that we control easier for folks that are actually applying for the grants and stuff?
Absolutely, and this year we did. So the CAT and SDI grants, because we already know, we removed some pieces of the grant process because we understand the relevance and the public benefit. We ourselves are out there preaching it to the choir, and it's the same project year in after year. And so we don't need, it becomes an easy process to dictate, or not dictate, but to lay out for someone. Like, here's how it is. And we're just gathering so much information that we can say, here's your cost estimate, here's how long it's gonna take, here's here's your problem area. So we can go out and really really narrow down the process, because it's the same thing year after year after year after year.
So there's, conservatively, there's this strong decade of this process going forward.
Yeah, 12 or 13 years, yeah, now. And
No, I'm saying though, for future grant processes.
Oh, yeah,
you can
absolutely.
look ahead for the next decade, ignoring how much further we should be looking, but
Yeah.
for the next decade, we should be doing just this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Taking for granted it's a valuable thing, making it simple for the user.
Right.
And where possible, making it simpler for everyone by gathering,
Right.
what you call them, base points?
Controls, yeah.
Which are just the existing markers and stuff, survey?
Well, that's kind of complicated, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's
more
a
or less.
corner of a township.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so that if there are other ways we can gather that might also be worthy of grants.
Possibly. Yeah.
Some of this is just education. Really, any public construction project, it's very hard to get surveyors after the fact to give us control points. Understandably, they're business, right? And if they're going to do something, they should be reimbursed for it. But if you're out there, it's just like GIS projects 10, 15 years ago. People will go out and have projects done. GIS layers were generated, but they never asked for that as a deliverable. And so they didn't get it as a deliverable. And now they know to ask for it, and they get it. If we can get people to understand that every public construction project, the control should be public, they should request it, submit it to the database. That's not going to fill out the whole state, but that's going to help enormously.
It sounds a little bit like the state documents depository sort of.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is.
Paid for it.
It is a record. It is a state record. I mean, if you think about it, like MDT, they have surveyors on staff, and we had an incredible difficult time trying to convey it to the right people of what we needed and how we would like to get your control. And I was just at a meeting at the right place at the right time, and they're like, "You want control? Yeah, I'll give it to you." I mean, like, it's just like me asking 1,000 times. Finally, someone says yes, and we're going out and we're, kind of beating the drum to when we're at these conferences like League of Cities and Towns, MACO, economic developers. It's just being there to have the conversation. One-on-one with the commissioner, saying, they come in, they're curious, they're like, oh yeah, I use the cadastral, but my lines are all off. And then we get into that conversation. And so right now,
You can say, yeah.
Yeah, I've been working with Stillwater, and so I've got a commissioner who wants to file a grant, and I got a GIS person who, you know, maybe is a little hesitant right now, the workload's a little too much. But I've had county commissioners file grants. Custer County Commissioner, he's had 2 grants now. He's working on his 2nd grant. I mean, he's the one that's actually doing the work. He's the lead, not doing the work, but he's the lead, the project lead, and he's got his staff working on it, but he's the one that's applying for the grant. So it's working. It is definitely working. It's just, there's a lot more we can do.
So I wonder if this might be, just one final thought, and I'll shut up. This might work in with our partnership with MACO. Also might be legislation or arm revision. Because if this was just required as part of what you require in these contracts, and then there was a pipeline that would come in, then everyone's life would be simpler, and maybe we could accelerate this 50-year process to a 49-year process.
I don't think. Yeah, I think it would be it's very beneficial to state governments for our information to be as accurate as possible, and so it just takes the constant education, but then just being at the right place at the right time with the right people sometimes. And sometimes in a large agency like MDT, it's kind of hard to figure out who those people are.
You know, more than half the state doesn't have a GIS person locally. How many of these improvements have happened in counties that don't have a GIS staff? Roughly, I mean, guess.
Okay, so just CAT and SDI?
Yeah.
I would say none. I would say 0. I would say most with just CAT and SDI. And so, like, we've got Park County.
Yeah, I don't think anywhere.
Historically, we've got Lake County. Yeah, I think Yellowstone back in the day, a long time ago. Macomb, so Madison. So they all have. Sanders. Sanders probably is a good example. They don't really have.
Well, they got a GIS.
Like a lead. I don't know if.
They got a staff that's just GIS.
Yeah.
But it's probably important to start thinking about documenting some of that, particularly the more egregious issues outside before the next session of the legislature, because it's, I mean, legally it doesn't matter a hoot. None of this helps in a legal situation. You got to get a surveyor, and that's the way it works. But when you start to have, when we've kind of backed off of Next Gen 911 because we didn't get any funding to work on it, and, I mean, it's still part of the overall fabric. But that's I mean, it's one thing when an ambulance doesn't get there, because that's a big part of Next Gen is you're going to be identified, where you are based on, and who responds to you based on where you are physically.
Yeah.
So it's really critical, and I think there's a lack of understanding how important that is.
Yeah. Well, Harold, go ahead.
In regards to an ambulance getting there, my background is 12 years in EMS. I'm a paramedic. This adjustment is significantly important to myself, because when I call 911 and it comes in as this address and the dispatcher's looking and says, well, I can't find that address because of something wrong in the data set, so let me search by name. They find an empty parcel because the house is not in the parcel that it's supposed to be on. Yeah. It does have a significant impact in the 911 side. So,
when I was doing the work for the, I think it was called Senate Bill 98 back in the day on special districts, and that was when we were still a part of ITSD, and I was the administrative boundaries theme lead. Working a lot with Mako and Harold Flatty at the time, former executive director, and he did point out case law where a map took precedence over a legal description, because people can understand a map more than they can understand a legal description. So there might be a legality to it, depending upon who's using that information and how. I think it was a water dispute, I do believe it was like a southeastern county, and so he was able to kind of tell me about that. And so, I think depending upon your situation, I mean, maybe it could be a legal risk not to, have this. I mean, that's the one thing we do preach when people do call us, to say you need to consult a surveyor for your boundary lines when we're talking about cadastral, but we don't know how the information is being utilized out there beyond our every day-to-day reach. So, and there was a case recently I think it made national news. Oh, I can't remember the state. we had 2 contractors in here for LiDAR, and I know that's going to come up next. They were telling me about a situation somewhere, I do believe it's in the south, where a woman was being routed by NextGen 911 and to escape a predator, and she did end up driving into a lake and dying. And so I think it's unfortunate, but that's starting to drive the case in that state to really help push folks, quicker to the NextGen 911 and understanding it. And I think it's cases like that end up helping, unfortunate cases like that end up helping, promote what we're trying to do. We're trying to prevent as well. So that's just something else that I'd share.
In regards to Bruce's comment regarding the buy-in, I fully expect that as soon as this project, there's still going to be some cadastral alignment after this meeting. I fully expect that the commissioners, once they start seeing the benefit and seeing this, those green dots are where the control points were for Madison County. I expect within 15, 20 years, those green dots will be covering the entirety of Madison County.
The greening of Madison County.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot
So,
to do.
yes. So, but as the buy-in, as the understanding comes down from the commissioners, I fully see this becoming a major component for pursuit with MLA funds, with interaction with Montana State Library. I had some hesitation in my office regarding what are you doing, and I unfortunately speak nerd, and that doesn't always translate over very well. But as the commissioners gathered more of an understanding of it, the buy-in has more than doubled, I'd probably say tripled at this point, and once they see the final results, I expect it's going to be, hey, get another one of those grants and try and get this done because you're helping us a lot. We're not getting so many phone calls.
So you have 3 commissioners?
Correct.
And how many of them are pro-GIS at this point?
Nick,
It's a work in progress.
Yes, that's a good.
And one of
And
the
we're on-
commissioners
actually,
is the
we're on
president of
record. I shouldn't have
MACO.
asked that question in a public meeting. I'm sorry. I apologize. But I get your point. Your answer was a good answer. Leave it at that.
Our commissioners are working towards a better understanding of GIS, and as they're accomplishing that better understanding, they're seeing how it better helps the county and how to better utilize it. So I still believe that across the state there's a significant issue of, whoa, GIS, I don't know what that is. And that fear factor is what causes problems with a lot of local government, a lot of individuals that are trying to pursue improvement for their counties.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming in and showing us your project.
Thank you
We really
for all of
appreciate
your
it.
efforts. It's greatly appreciated.
All right. So right into our Montana Land Information Advisory Council report.
And Troy's going to talk about the LiDAR plan that the MLIAC adopted at their June meeting. I can pop that out.
Okay. Take it away.
Take it away, Troy.
All right. So thank you to the commission for having me today. We just talked about the fear factor, and I think when we get into LiDAR, that's a big one with that. Like, you get intimidated by the technology. Don't. What we're talking about here is elevation data, like really highly accurate elevation data. So that's what I'm showing there with my image. Just we're talking elevation from the plains and the lowlands all the way up to the mountain peaks and the really complex terrain. I've got a lot of really beautiful images for you today. But first, just real quickly on LiDAR, like I said, don't get intimidated by the technology. I like to say that think radar, think sonar. I think people are familiar with those. So LiDAR versus radar. So radio is radio detection and ranging, and then LiDAR is light detection and ranging. So it's just a technology for measuring distance. So it's light flown from a plane that's going down and bouncing off the earth and returning to the plane. It's able to compute those to various distances. So another good one is like a laser measuring tool, if you're familiar with those, that gets your house to measure the dimensions of your room. It's that type of technology. It's a laser light going down and bouncing off the earth or hitting the trees or the buildings and then returning to the plane. So what we can do with that is create things like this, a very highly accurate depiction of the Earth's surface. So like just looking at this, you can see the detail, and like this is the Beaverhead River. So this is I-15 north here, or south, and then the river, and then the mountains come in from above, and you can just see the detail there. Like look at this rock outcropping here. So if you think about having that kind of detail with things like trying to identify faults, those sorts of things. So comparing this to what we have now, so with LiDAR, you're getting accurate elevation values to a matter like 4 inches, so about like that. And you're getting that across the entire Earth's surface every meter. So about every that far, you've got a super accurate 4 to 6 inch, very detailed elevation measurement. So compared to what we have now, right now we have what's called the 10-meter national elevation data set. The accuracy of that is somewhere in the 2.4 meter range, so what's that, about 7 feet? So taller than me, so it's just dramatic improvement there in the accuracy. In its raw form, LiDAR comes in the form of it can either hit the ground, or it could hit the top of a tree, or it could hit a building. So you can create this cross section that shows all that. So the green there is, on the legend there it says default, but that's basically everything that's not ground or water is what that means. So in this case, it looks like it's probably trees or some sort of vegetation. And the points hitting the tops of the building there are the purple, so you're seeing the rooftops. And then we'll talk about ground hits. So that's the red points there. So some of that light makes it all the way to the ground, and that's what we're trying to do, is create that bare earth ground depiction when we're creating those elevation models. So from that point cloud, you can create things like this. This is a bare earth digital elevation model. So this is the surface of the earth without things like trees and buildings shown. So when you think about that, like in my realm of things is water, so mapping hydrography. So with that map on the left there, you can see what can tell us that maybe an image can't. So those small elevation differences, depicts the old channels, the little meanders, everything that ends up getting during high waters, everything that fills up there. On the right there, that's Fresno Dam near Havre. So the dam face is right here. You're looking down the river. You can see this kind of information here. You wouldn't see that kind of thing on an image. So this is different elevations. So if you think about that with any kind of like flood modeling, the importance of having that detailed information. So we had that last one was the bare earth digital elevation model. This is called the surface elevation model. So this includes those hits on the trees and the buildings. So the image on the left there is Harleton with the Musselshell River running through right here. You see all the trees and the buildings. On the right, this is also the Musselshell River, where red is now highlighting the building footprints. So we've got the bare earth there, and then we've also got the surface. So the difference between those would be the heights of the trees. So you can create something like this, which is canopy height. So the different colors here represent different heights of, in this case, trees. So the blue are the lower areas, so your lowest elevations are going to be your lakes. So you can see some wetlands and ponding areas in here. And then these higher these oranges and reds, those are going to be your higher elevations, your higher, your taller trees. So these will be like your more old growth. So you can get this type of information too. What I thought was interesting when looking at this, like you can see clear, you can see kind of squares there. At first I thought maybe that was problem with the data, but I think it's showing land management differences, some differences in how that forest is harvested. The little image here on the left, that's another bare earth, and this is for the same area. So you can see the detail, even under the trees, how much information you're getting about the ground. So all those small swales throughout that area creating those little wetlands that you then see up in here. The last product, this is the main way for visualizing the data. This is called a hill shade. This is just taking the sun angle into account to do different shading to make ridges stand out. Makes the data look 3D. A trained eye can look through this stuff and find things like this middle image. This is picking out a fault. This came from the Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology. It's a fault that runs right through here. This is Big Creek Curlew Mine in the Bitterroot. I thought it was interesting to see that fault basically kind of runs right through there, through that mining reclamation. So you can think of like the importance there for understanding that and the risk and those sorts of things. That's it for there might be a few more cool images. With those images, some of those were produced by our staff. A lot of them came from the LiDAR vendors. We feature most of them within the LiDAR plan, and we're going to try to add more in there. I'd like to get just a lot of really nice images in there. This is uses of LiDAR data, and these are only uses that have been identified by our working group, so it's by no means exhaustive. And then I've summarized it in an infographic here on the left. So my list there doesn't necessarily represent totally separate uses. There's a lot of overlap there, but it's unique projects. So in that case, they're all a little bit separate. But you can see that within Montana, it's largely flood risk management, water resources, hydrologic modeling that dominates it, but also you see hazard mapping in there, transportation infrastructure. Notice those are all just different by a couple numbers though, so there's really no standout ranking there or anything like that. So now the LiDAR plan, which is what I was invited to talk about today. So the goal of the plan was just to make recommendations, collection, maintenance of LiDAR data, with the goal being statewide LiDAR coverage by 2023. That's quite ambitious. I think a year or two ago, we all would have kind of laughed at that. I know we were all feeling pretty intimidated by that. I remember sitting in this room, Bruce, with you and Ken, talking like, we know this data is important. Like, how are we going to do this?
I think the number was 60 or 65 million.
Yeah, the number was 60 million.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, from there, like, my message today is like, it's happening. Like,
This is so cool.
The timing is good. Like, there's things happening at the federal level that we can get a lot of assistance here. This is what LiDAR coverage is. This map, I grabbed this, it's probably a year and a half. So this was right as we were starting the LiDAR plan. What coverage looked like in Montana. So the gray there is LiDAR of any quality level, and then the green is what meets the federal USGS specifications. So you can just see the hole there in the west. So just the message here is like we must be next, like it's coming. We need to start filling out Montana. In the bottom right there, that's an inset, just a kind of a blow up there of Montana. Helena's right here. And all I'm just trying to show with that is like, so far all the acquisitions have been pretty small corridors, small areas, and just through our planning, like we're being ambitious. We're trying to go after countywide. Like we want larger collections. We're trying to, regionally consistent, cover large areas. So just in general, like our planning efforts are happening countywide. We want to find partners at the county level and work with USGS and other partners to get entire counties flown with LiDAR. Looking at the numbers, the bottom one's the important one. That's what we have left to go, 100,000 square miles left to collect. That's about 70% of the state. This tells the story of, so the one on the left is square miles of LiDAR acquired by year. So the blue is all years previous to 2017. Orange is 2018, and gray is 2019. So you can see it's the last 2 years, the big jump there, both both years have been close to 20,000 square miles being collected. The one on the right is by organization. So you see FEMA and DNRC, that's the blue. They've been the main agency driving LiDAR collection in the state. And then another large player has been NRCS, that's the orange. Our plan was developed in coordination with the Elevation Working Group. This is just a number of agencies involved, federal, state, county, local, all levels of government. You can see the partners listed there. We had our most recent meeting was just yesterday. I think that was about 25 folks involved with that meeting yesterday. And yesterday we were talking all about like planning, future collections, where are we going next, and thinking about when we go to USGS with our next application for asking for funding, that we're prepared and we have our areas all figured out. Maybe I'll try this. Got screenshots of it. Anyways, so far, like our main I can't remember if I've shown this to you guys or not. It works a little bit different on smaller screens too, but we've got these various tabs up here. So the most important ones are this one. This is the current status of LiDAR in the state. The light blue, so up here, or green maybe, I don't know what color that is. And then here, this is basically means planes are in the air now. These are being actively being collected right now. The next blue there, these slightly darker blue, it's been acquired, but there's a lot of processing that needs to happen. So these areas have been acquired, but they're going through processing, so they're not available yet. And then this yellow is what's planned. So this stuff here, and then Granite County over here, this was our first success. So we applied through this broad area announcement program with USGS called 3D Elevation Program to receive some cost share to acquire areas in Montana. And at that time it just felt like let's just try it. Let's just put something in and see what happens. And they awarded it. So this is 6,000 square miles, I think, $1.25 million to acquire LiDAR either this coming spring or next fall. So I mean, that's telling us is USGS is going to be, they're going to do whatever they can. They're going to be flexible. They're going to work with us. They want to see plans and they want to see coordination. And if you're showing that within the state, they're going to do everything that they can.
So for acquisition and processing, or just acquisition?
So what they deliver is all set. It's all ready. So it's
good
with the set. There's a set of products. So you get the bare earth DM, you get the point cloud, yeah. But yeah, there's not like there's no processing on our end necessary for.
Right.
Yeah.
That was the question.
Yeah, as far as like taking the point cloud and creating products from it. Now there's processing as far as like making it usable size-wise and those kinds of things and that kind of data management things that need to happen. And then there's additional products that the state's interested in that we would need to produce ourselves. The hillshade's not provided. That's a fairly simple task for us, but it's just the amount of data makes it very time-consuming. So there's additional products like that the state would be producing. But what's needed, yeah.
When they do an acquisition on like one of the rivers or streams and those long narrow things, I assume that rounding out the county, I mean, roughly is maybe only twice as much as just that. I mean, to get the plane there and the logistics.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think the cost savings there for going large areas is somewhere like 30%.
30%.
Yeah. So this stuff where we're getting corridors, this kind of acquisition is probably not going to be our going forward. That's probably not going to be what happens. It's going to be let's fly the whole county.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get the whole county.
Troy, can you show? I think it's on the request data. You got the link to the page with all the tiles.
Oh yeah.
Just so because it's all delivered. This is kind of the standardized methodology for USGS, where you're going to get it delivered in these very small tiles. And so when we talk about developing, say, a statewide elevation data set, it is a significant amount of work to get to that from this, just because there's so many tiles.
Yeah.
So as part of the state LiDAR plan, the library was recognized as the appropriate agency to be the repository for the data. So we've been working hard at that, getting whatever data we can get from DNRC and all the other agencies. This map is showing what we have so far. It loads up here. But as Evan's describing, like, you'll see that it's chunked into really little tiles that are almost not that usable. They're done that way for download and to be able to actually get the data. But then as a user, when you're trying to use it, like, you've got all these tiny little areas that you then gotta piece together to make it more useful. But
Have you had any private sector partners on these developers?
Interest, yes, for sure. We don't have any like private partners that have been involved yet as far as funding. Yeah. So these little tiles here, like, this is the data that we have right now at the library on an archive stored at the State Data Center. So we're starting to get close to having most of what is available so far. But I mean, you saw, well, with the plan, like, so far, like, if you look at all this stuff, it's all like the corridor type things. Like, we're not dealing at all yet with the county stuff. That's all coming. So that's just a heads up for what we have coming.
And again, you're aiming for the whole state by 2023.
That's in line with what the USGS's goals are, so we wanted to stay in line with that as well. But yeah,
That makes sense.
just tremendous changes there in the amounts of data.
How much of this data will be available to non-GIS professionals who just like to look at the pretty pictures?
So, like the hillshade?
Yeah. Or you had some false color stuff in your report that was stunning.
Yeah.
It was beautiful images.
Yeah, so with those hillshades, like, we intend to produce web services, which then are available just through any viewer on the web, through like a lot of our other, like, our imagery products and some of our, or all our layers essentially. So there'll be that viewing piece of it, but that's going to be for those hillshades. So you won't be able to really get at the point cloud and do some of that more advanced stuff. But just being able to look at it and maybe pick out faults and some of that kind of stuff, or just look at the data that.
I was thinking for Joe Public, Jane Public, and that's fascinating stuff. I mean, it's like looking at an atlas and falling into the atlas and emerging several hours later. I just think that one of our rules, the public end of it is, it's not the technical end, but that's beautiful stuff. And this is the new atlas, and it's lovely when people have access to it.
Right. Yeah. So we've done some experimenting with that. We're getting to where we feel like we could probably have some services. You know, statewide is a totally different challenge, but there's going to be some projects that we could definitely highlight that way, and maybe we could pick things like, you know, Pompey's Pillar, or important, like, neat features in cities to show them. Yeah.
Pick all, and just work your way down from that, because people always want to see where they live.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to see what
I'm going to switch back to the my
color.
PowerPoint now.
Let's see what kind of cool abstract shapes it is. Yeah, even if it didn't just the boring form, because it's beautiful. You know?
All right.
These are important things.
So we've been taking requests for data. I just wanted to provide a little bit of information on that. So we've got this request form where people can come in here and choose which products they want. So again, this would have the challenge of they would need to have GIS software and understand the technology and that sort of thing. But we've been getting a lot of requests from the private side, from contractors, planning for like bridges and transportation design.
Northwest Energy do their own, or do they?
They've got the LiDAR they need is a lot even higher level detail. It's for flying like power lines and things like that. So I think they do a lot of their own real small type collections. But we've been talking with Northwest to see if we can get them involved as a partner.
They must spend a lot of money on vegetation removal along the lines and stuff.
Yep. So this is just showing the number of requests we've received. This was, I mean, we went live with this in June, so it's only been a couple months. Just down at the bottom, there are 34 requests so far. And then we're tracking use so we can get an understanding of what people need this data for. this is lining up so far pretty well with what our stakeholders were saying, that flood risk management, that's this blue here. And then this is flood management here, sorry. And this is hydrologic modeling. So the green there is completed requests, and then yellow is the pending requests. And then the black ones there are data that's not here at MSL, so that's helping inform us where people are looking for the data. So that helps with our future planning on additional areas to collect. I'm not going to touch too much on the technical specification, just know like this is probably the most important part of the plan, like just setting consistency in how the data is collected. We've largely adopted the USGS specifications, just so that we're in line at the national level. But the message here is like just anyone collecting LiDAR data, you know, we know there's going to continue to be some small specific projects for maybe collecting a dam or power lines and those sorts of things. Like, we expect that, like, and we don't want them to have to coordinate and go through this, like necessarily going with this huge county-wide collection. Like there's going to be timing reasons why they need to do their own. So as long as they're following specifications, you know, that's all appropriate for the larger archive and the larger collection. So that's important.
The other
part of the
big
plan.
thing there is that in order for us to be able to include it as a match for any kind of cost share for collection, they would have to have a minimum of quality level 2. Right. I say minimum. Quality level 1 is better than 2. So can't be higher than minimum.
So this is that $50 million that Bruce was talking about. The price estimate right now is in the $35 million range to finish out the state with that 100,000 square miles. Just some estimates there at the county level, since that's where our planning is. A larger county, the largest in the state's Beaverhead, that's somewhere in the estimate of like $2 million. The smallest county, Silverbow, is in the $250,000 range. So those numbers, I mean, those numbers are really intimidating, and that's kind of discouraged us in the past from trying to find state share to come up with that. But just the general approach laid out in the plan is that we're going to try to identify partnerships. We're going to identify as many partnerships as we can and get people involved with this application and whatever funding they can provide. And we'll put the application into the USGS 3D elevation program, and that's a cost share program. So in the past they've said they're looking for somewhere around 40% to come from the state. Even that is super difficult for the state of Montana because we don't have the tax base or any way to really support that. So like the new message from there is everyone should be putting in an application if they want LiDAR. That's what they've been saying most recently in the last BAA announcement. So that's telling us like they're going to do what they can, and like maybe that 60-40 is going to be flopped, and like if we could come up with even some, they're going to be able to come up with some of those larger amounts. We also see changes happening at the federal level to where the Forest Service and NRCS and some of the other federal agencies are coming on board pretty strong with funding. So again, for us, it's all about like having a plan and showing the interest and doing what we can to coordinate the effort. I mentioned this.
Is BLM on board as a partner?
So BLM, we haven't heard much from them until very recently. They were involved with our working group meeting just yesterday, and that was the first that they'd really showed some interest there.
Okay.
So yeah, we do hope to get more involvement from BLM. Yeah.
And that doesn't mean we didn't. They may have been doing stuff for the state at the federal level.
Yeah, right.
We're just starting to communicate with them, so we'll find out.
Yeah. I think there's been confusion about that at the federal level and how the Forest Service can participate with USGS. Like a lot of that's kind of happening between the federal agencies, but like the message, as we understand, is like those agencies should work like with the state, and as one big application, federal, state, all partners, that then goes to USGS. So there is that push at the federal level to get them more involved with working more at this local level rather than solely at the federal level. I mentioned this already. This was the application we put in for this past. We put the application in May. It was awarded in June, and we're expecting those blue areas there on the map to be flown in this spring or fall. So throughout the LiDAR plan, we make recommendations. I've got those listed here for you. We were going through the LiDAR inventory, so to continue to work on that is one of our goals. One of the most important pieces of that is that there's a map in there where you can set your priority areas. So we want agencies, federal up in the next year or two where LiDAR would be important. And those are going to be the areas that we prioritize and submit to USGS for acquisition. As we've discussed, like one of the issues with LiDAR is the technology and just the fear there. So we want to be developing tools that make the application process simpler, and then develop MOUs that allow other agencies to have agreements with us to provide funding. Number 3 is an obvious one there, actively engaged partners. We've got it in here as a task, just it's that active part, like we've got to be doing it, like we've got to have people making calls. Aaron and I are largely going to be doing that, but we've also tasked the working group with some of those responsibilities of reaching out to folks in their counties. The number 8 there, as Bruce was discussing there, like these are very beautiful images, and like just through outreach of just posters, postcards, handouts, one-pagers, those types of things that we can put together just to raise awareness of both the state LiDAR plan, but then just LiDAR and opportunities in general. That's all I have. I'm happy to take questions and comments.
What goes into a LiDAR repository? What are the outcomes?
The products. So in its raw form, it's called the LAS data set. It's just a collection of points. Basically a text file that's a X, Y, Z. But then there's also the digital elevation models that I've shown. Those are one of the deliveries as well, and those are called ESRI grid. They're specific to GIS software. They can also be GeoTIFFs, which is more accessible to a lot of other software in addition to ArcGIS. And then we also, for a number of projects, contours. So contours would just be like a shapefile or some vectorized data set that depicts the elevation.
Do you have an estimate as to what the total bio district requirements will be?
Yeah, so we've done a really rough estimate of that statewide, and it's in the 300 to 500 terabyte range. Pretty ridiculous. So that's by far more than our total digital collection right now.
Yeah, but you know, it's not that ridiculous. I mean, it's just this space. We don't have to have it here. It can be anywhere. And you know, we used to think that having a 5 megabyte phone was a big deal, and now it's.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. I mean, it's just that moves in orders of magnitude. That's not a scary number. I mean, this is such cool stuff. That's not a scary number.
Well, the technology's improving, so the cost has already come down from what it was before.
Wouldn't want to do it twice, but.
Well, some states are.
Some states, a lot of states
Yeah,
are.
some states are on 2.0. LiDAR's.
Oh no,
Yeah.
I get that part.
Yeah.
That was Evan made that clear to me,
Yeah.
that you do it, and then next year in some places you need to do it again to gather the data. But I was just thinking in terms of building the infrastructure to take and make this
Oh, right.
then useful. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, it's definitely scalable.
Right.
It would be a substantial increase to our IT budget.
Well,
Just to be
no,
clear,
so-
I don't think it's not groundbreaking. It's not new technology we're getting into or anything like that. So
It's
I would
money.
agree it's not a big deal. But yes, it's money.
So and
Significant
I'm sure that this is siphoned neatly into the entrance study. Fabulous.
I can talk a little bit about outreach. So some of the number 8, we kind of are on a pause because of unfortunately Maya's departure. But I guess imitation is the best form of flattery, and we've seen some stuff that other states have done. And so what we plan on doing is finding some significant areas that we can, I don't know what areas we'll choose, but we're going to take a few of those areas, and it's just stunning. It's beautiful. I don't think it's anything that what you had showed, some of the things we were talking about doing.
No, I didn't have any examples.
Yeah, but it's phenomenal. It's like river corridors over time, and then you can just see it. And so we were thinking of, maybe like Missoula, where there's a river that runs through the city, so you can see the differences. But using that as making posters and then postcards, and then making that available to folks to kind of like help spread the word there. Because not only is it, is it displaying our data, it's also something people might end up putting on the wall.
Well, when I read the report, I was looking at stuff saying, I wish I had had one of these kinds of pictures of this area, and I was going to add a little bit of type, and I was going to put it in my entrance. Honest to God, that was my first thought. My second thought is, since you're talking about doing away with silos, you have a bunch of experts on your staff who know really smart public service librarians in all of the communities who could tell you for their community what would be the cool image or images, and if you were to build a public awareness advocacy program around the public as part of the technical presentation, you'd be able to take and hit the bullseye every time. I'm looking at Tracy.
Yeah, and we've had to do that. We've had to do our one-pagers. We've had to kind of, like, when we're going out and doing outreach, Troy and I have been, I think, pretty nimble to be able to, like, okay, now we have to change this. We're going to go talk to transportation. And that's what everyone, when we go and approach someone about partnership, that's what they ask us for every time. I need a one-pager. Give me a one-pager. And so we've done it for lots of different folks. So, and we've had a lot of help from the contractors that are a part of our working group to develop those, because they're the ones that are, they're experts and they're really out there selling this information. But we also, we did get on MACO's schedule, and so we will be presenting at MACO the LIDAR plan, and then we're going to be talking about the LIDAR plan at upcoming ITMC meeting, which is the Information Technology Managers Council that reports, advises the governor, and it's head by the state CIO.
But part of the process, from my point of view, is that we want to have legislative support for increased funding. And the way we get that is a more general sort of non-technical enthusiasm on the part of the public. And so I'm saying there's this other opportunity for kind of a grassroots push of legislators who will never sit down with a terminal and use it technically, but they get the fact that their grandchild or their husband or their wife or their neighbor or a local businessman saw this at their public library or wherever it was and said, this is the coolest thing since sliced bread.
Right, absolutely.
This is a promise fulfilled of all this technocrat. This is the good stuff.
In those posters and postcards, that would be like something that could be a rack card that sits in a local public library, or a poster that hangs in a public library. It could be something that we take to one of our many conferences that we attend, the more the public outreach that we've been doing with the fairs and other things like that. So we do, it is on our radar.
And there's a chance for more dynamic, not just a printed product, but other kinds of more interactive products that would be even more versatile.
Esri has a beta program. It's called the ArcGIS Experience.
Yeah.
It's kind of a hybrid between the new web app builder and stuff, but it'd be perfect for these kind of fact sheets. We really like that slide of the use cases. It'd be great if we had a one-page fact sheet on each of those with some examples. That's really the meat that we need to, you're doing anything with maps and the planners and would be another.
Maps, national maps.
No, the Montana Association of Planning would be another good one.
We are not on their schedule this year yet, but probably next year. There's a lot of overlap with conferences.
We need to pick Jamie's, but we really need a way that cows can benefit from this.
I'm sorry?
We really need a way that cows can benefit from LiDARs.
Oh, no.
Use cases.
Actually, that did come up yesterday, and I have it on my list to contact the president of the Montana Beef Growers Association. There's an interested party in Madison County, and he the individual from Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology. That's where Peter was. And so he we'll be contacting the beef growers, stock growers. I can't remember which one it is here in the state.
We did it in Australia. Through my company, we did it. Worked on a $7 million hotel project hinged on LiDAR. Queensland had it for all in line of sight. Any kind of legislation local governments can do to do new sheds. I mean, Elk Foundation does that all the time. A lot of, that really drives a lot of this. And their whole thing was, one guy had a solar array or had a solar panel on his roof, and that allowed him to put one more level on this hotel, big hotel.
Well, I hate to cut short great conversation, but I would like to move forward. So,
Thanks.
Thank you.
yes, thank you,
Thanks,
Troy,
Troy.
so much. Kenny, do you have the beta cadastral application overview?
Maybe we should call it Cowmaster so we can get some of that too.
Not that much bigger.
Oh, well. What a shame. Okay, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do this since I was hoping to use this one, but we had some problems this morning. Let's see what the internet's going to look like for us. Well,
I have no idea. Or Julie Christie.
excuse me.
Go Chrisley. Time for new glasses. Like everything's in detail.
Excuse me for just a moment. Well, it seems to load okay, so I think we'll be good. Good afternoon, commissioners and everyone else. My name's Kenny Kedner. I'm the information products lead here at the Montana State Library. I'm going to talk today about the cadastral beta project, which is nearing its final stages, so it's a good time to run it by the Library Commission. So, you are all probably familiar with this current cadastral application. It's, I would say, easily our most used web product at the State Library. I don't know if we want to go into too much history about it, but it's about a decade old or so now. And so that sort of is driving the conversation about why do we need a new cadastral. Well, this is made with an older design framework that's kind of starting to show its age. Doesn't look great on mobile or tablet. It's hard to see the pointer, excuse me. All these controls on the side, you can't get rid of them. So on a phone, they just take up more and more of the screen until you're done. I will say it is a remarkably well-engineered product, though. It has lasted us this long, and I've certainly been impressed by it. But the print functionality is also another problem area that people have given us feedback about. In addition to being the most heavily used web application, I'm certain it's the #1 source for calls to the State Library for help using the application. What's also been difficult to modify or extend this version of the application in its current form. We don't have a way to communicate with our users in this version of cadastral, and we don't really have a way to understand how our users interact with it. What are they using the most? What do they want it to do, other than the phone calls we get, of course. So I will talk now about the beta version. So some of the features in the new cadastral. We're keeping, of course, all the old features from the current cadastral, some of which are still in progress, like the buffer select tool is one example. This application is built using the Esri Web App Builder framework. This is a technology that's been around 4 or 5 years now, I guess, from Esri. Still considered pretty new, although they're already talking Experience Builder now as the next thing after Web App Builder, but there is a promise from Esri that they will continue to support Web App Builder. And so the reasons we selected the Web App Builder technology are because it's more modular, so we can design pieces of it that can even be used in other applications. It is part of the application still has to be custom, sort of hand-done code, but there is a lot of what you see is what you get type of editors available to work on and improve this application. And it's, you know, we were seeing a lot of cool Web App Builder applications sort of popping up, and it seemed like a good fit for Cadastral. So some of the features, and I'll just talk through as we go, and I have some backup screenshots just in case. But first thing you'll notice, obviously, is the splash screen, which will give us a way to front and center communicate with our users and make sure that the disclaimer is seen. That disclaimer has saved our butts many times, because Cadastral is a wonderful tool for the public to use, but is not suitable for a legal purpose or an engineering purpose. You have to go to the authoritative data source in that case. So the first thing you'll notice, oh boy, to try and interact without moving there we go, is that it's a full screen mapping application, which will be better for mobile and tablet, but it looks better anyway. That's sort of a modern expectation for a mapping application, is that you want it to be full screen. At the top, we still have our links to the FTP data downloads for people who just want the cadastral data to load into their GIS software. Links to a manual, which we still have to write for the new version. Of course, the disclaimer, and then an email feedback link. On our vertical controls here, we've got your zoom in, zoom out. This is on the top left. Our return to default extent. This is the location. So if you're on a phone, it can zoom the map extent to your location if you have location services turned on. We have a full screen option to make it even more full screen. And then, of course, the previous and next extent if you're navigating back and forth. Some of these controls now going horizontally. We've got our base map gallery, which this is still a subject of some discussion about which base maps we want to improve, but certainly we could add cool new base maps as we come up with them, like that LiDAR hillshade would be a good candidate for adding here once that's available as a service. We'll see if it'll load some imagery for us. Oh good, it's behaving. And we've also got the swipe tool in this, which is something that people usually like, and so you can swipe the base map away. So let's see here. The next tool is the measurement tool. This is the Esri default measurement tool, but this is something that was a common request from the old Cadastral, is being able to measure in different units, distances and areas both. This is the default Esri print, which I'm not going to run through, but suffice it to say it will print the map extent that you're on. This is the quick zoom tool, which was developed with the aid of a developer from Esri, using some of our Esri credits, and it replicates the functionality of the quick zoom tool in the current Cadastral. So let's see if we can zoom to Lewis and Clark County as an example. There we go. And then we've got the Cadastral search, and here's a current stumbling point that we hope to resolve with Esri developer help. The accordion control is not working correctly there. But at any rate, let's see if we can do it live. Always exciting to do a, oh dear. There's got to be some Smiths. Nope. Okay. Not sure why it's not communicating with the search. But that's okay. That's why I brought screenshots. Which I think I will switch to now, actually. Give me just a moment.
About how many hits does these services get a day at this point?
Evan, can you get that off the top of your head?
I can tell you it's about 400,000 a month.
400,000 a month.
Mm-hmm. That sounds right.
So 12,000 a day or something. Am I doing my math right?
Yeah, no, I'm guessing.
It's the.
I'm talking services, but I forget the actual cadastral.
I'm thinking about customers as much as anything.
It's the top. I think it bounces between number 2 and 3 top used state websites.
Statewide.
All state.
Including the state web splash page?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So here's a screenshot from earlier in the morning with an example of the search and using the new property card, which the interface we're using there is a 3 tabs for the most recent 3 tax years, and then the accordion control within is similar to the current cadastral. And the print there, which I can show you a sample of, but not a live version of, is the PDF printout of the property card information. So I can pull that up on the other screen. Like this, the printout of the map extent and then summary of the property information in tabular form, laid out, with as much care as we can, trying to improve on the current property card printout. And again, available as a PDF, I think is something that a lot of our users will like. Let's see. Switch back to that screenshot while I finish going through my notes here. So another feature of the new cadastral is that behind the scenes we can have Google Analytics to track even individual clicks of different tools within the application. So we'll be able to get some insight about what the most popular tools are. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll have room to expand by creating new widgets to drop in here, and hopefully also taking like the cadastral property card and being able to drop that into other web app builder applications. And I could see custom widgets being developed for sort of audience specific needs, realtors maybe, or appraisers, civic planners, whatever. Maybe using some of our multiple years of imagery data to do kind of a, slider where you can look at your property over time, that sort of thing. So I'll take some questions in a minute, but let me just mention some other important cadastral news that's relevant. The Department of Revenue has really greatly improved their nightly data update process. Used to be that if you were using cadastral after 5 p.m., you probably just couldn't get it to work until 8 a.m. the next day because it took literally that long to crunch the data. Now they've got it to where the downtime is just a few minutes, and it happens around midnight. So that's a huge improvement from our friends at Department of Revenue. The next phase of this project, once we launch the interface, is to look at the data services themselves and see if we can improve there. For example, one request that we got at the MLIAC meeting was to have the statewide owner search instead of only countywide. And similar other searches are limited to only countywide searches, which is frustrating, say if you have a ranch that spans county lines or something like that. So we believe we could make a new service that would be able to accommodate that. The servers that Cadastral runs on is hosted at ITSD, and they're approaching end of life within the next 6 months. So it's kind of a problem and opportunity moment there to upgrade those, and we'll work with our colleagues at ITSD to do that as smoothly as possible. And also, I mentioned new documentation for this is coming, and also Aaron and Jessica have been doing working on a library program about Cadastral, so inform library patrons around the state about this application that they may not know about and how they can use it. And then the idea is to train the trainers there so that the librarians around the state can train their patrons how to use this. So I think that's everything I wanted to run through. Are there questions? And I can send the link to the beta to Marlis so that we can add it to the minutes maybe.
Kenny, can you remind us of the timeline for testing and launch?
So the goal is to have the beta and the current Cadastral live for 6 months alongside each other. And sort of the drop dead date to do that is October 1st, so that we can get fourth quarter of this year and first quarter of next year as the live beta time. And that's pushed back a little bit from our earlier goals, unfortunately, but we did our first demo of this at Legislative Night way back in February. But there are a few pieces of the application that are quite stubborn. So here we are. Any other questions?
So do I understand correctly that most of this is you're using Esri tools
That's
to
right.
build this? Very little, you're gluing it together, but it's Esri tools.
It's still a bit of a Frankenstein monster behind the scenes. There are pieces of the old Cadastral code joined with the Esri web app builder tools, and the reason we're doing it that way is because of the data service itself. Sometimes the calls to the Cadastral data service return JavaScript code that is calling the Cadastral code in a certain way, and so that code has to exist here to respond to the data services. I hope that makes sense, but
Yeah.
And this is phase one of an overall Cadastral
Right.
update. Phase one being interface updates, phase two being the data.
yeah.
Is it allowable for us to explore mounting this data on a service like Amazon or Microsoft or?
Well, that's gotten to be more of a political issue over the years, I think.
There's a little bit of that. The other piece of this is that the bulk of this data is the CAMA data set.
Yes.
The Orion Department of Revenue's database. So
Yeah, and my understanding is they don't want to put that on Amazon Web Services or anything like that.
yeah, all of the services that feed all of this, the spatial, the features that you see, the parcels themselves, those are pulling from our Azure Managed Services, which is Amazon.
And I assume that the actual data that's being used is coming from, it's coming from revenue, and that data is backed up on the offsites to site and et cetera. I mean, how solid, how bomb-proof, how secure is this?
Well, their data, I think, is hosted at the data center, so that means it
It's
falls.
duplicated someplace else.
Yeah, so that's got Miles City has the offsite data
For the
replication.
failover, yeah.
Yes. And then the map layers and so forth that's us. And that, of course, follows our data policies.
One of the, I think, cool things about the experience builder when it comes is that it integrates 2D, 3D. It'd really, given the popularity of this and the sort of layperson thing, it'd really be cool if the main display had a,
Like to drop you in.
because that would bring the 40% of the people that don't understand what a flat map is into the equation.
I agree, and there's sort of a hard divide on the Esri JavaScript SDK side. If you want to do all of the 2D things, you still need to be in the 3.x JavaScript SDK. But if you want to start doing the cool 3D stuff that's requires the 4.x. So it's kind of a matter of once all the functionality from the JavaScript 3 SDK is available in 4, then it would be the right time to move over completely. But I'm certainly open to playing with it. But
plan for it, because it's not very
right.
intensively neat. The map part isn't very super complex.
That's right. Yeah, it's really just a few map layers. I mean, that parcels layer is mostly why people are here, and then getting to the property card itself. But I agree, there's a lot of potential to do some of those cool ideas with it.
What's the timeline for the train-the-trainer type workshops? Are you going to wait until you switch over to the beta? Or?
Well, I don't know, Aaron. What do you think? Is that?
Right now, there's no plan to.
That was kind of a test run, right, with Missoula that you guys did.
Well, it was our first one. There's no plan right now to do training because we were kind of waiting for
I
the
gotta get
application
the
to be developed and working so that we could build the training. But in the we wanted to roll out the new one, but because we were kind of a little further behind in the programming, in the building of the programming, we wanted just to go ahead and move on with the idea of doing these cadastral trainings with libraries as soon as possible, because one thing that we realized, and Jessica and I had spoken about when she first arrived here, is as user services, we were kind of examining the calls that were coming in and the data requests and whatnot. We have actually got some really good data about all the calls that we get, and which has kind of driven the process for new requests. And so in some situations we can't solve all of our users' needs, and we wanted to be able to say, okay, go to your public library. They've been trained on how to do this. It's like sometimes we get to a point where it's just like we've been on the phone with you for an hour. We have to draw a boundary because we can't spend an hour with every person that calls. And so that was our intention, is to try to in certain cases where we I guess satisfied with everything we could do, that they could go in and take a training, or maybe sit down one-on-one with a librarian that knew how to do that. Fast forward through the cuts, everything that happened, we weren't really able to get anything started till this year. And so when working with Missoula, that one kind of was more developed for to get them to use it in the reference requests. So we were teaching everyone at the library there, the staff that attended, I think we had like maybe 8 folks, how to use it. So then when people came in and asked them for reference requests, well, do you know about this? So we suggested that they put it on their laptop or their computers, and possibly do a train the trainer later. But we do have one scheduled for Billings, and that is going to be a train the trainer type of event. So this one was more or less, let's introduce cadastral, I think, and then eventually let's possibly get some courses scheduled.
I think it's useful to do even with the current cadastral, just because it's so heavily used.
Exactly. It's not going away. It's another 6 months. People are gonna still want to use it. We're in this weird spot.
It's kind of an in-between moment,
But I think that once you get them hooked, they'll be ready to jump into the new one.
Does it take how long does it take for you to do the training workshops?
Were you on our short list? Were you on? I thought we reached out to you. Can't remember if Amelia had. Like 4 hours.
Oh, well, I was thinking maybe that would be a good pre-conference at the MLA conference, because those are happening.
That's a good idea.
Oh, we have done that actually. Jessica and I have, we've done that multiple times.
Kind of
I never get to go to those because I always go to this.
We did the Chico the fall workshop thing, the services of the state library, and then we've done multiple trainings on our services at the library events. But we were, I can't remember, did the MLA announcements get put out for the presentation topics already?
No, I don't think so.
They're usually quite early. Last year we missed it, but
I think it'll be out, I saw a timeline here, I think it'll be out around early September.
Jessica and I were contemplating doing a whole day of geography type events because we have a new contact with the USGS who, Tom Carlson, who would like to come in and train people how to use the USGS Togo show.
Oh, that would be cool.
And he volunteered, so of course we're going to take him on it.
Thank you.
I have one little question. Is
Sure.
FWP interested in hunting district and private property versus state lands? And
Yeah, no, it's funny. A lot of the big, heavy downloaders of cadastral data are companies that specialize in like Onyx Maps in Missoula. Gets the cadastral data every day and rolls that into their application. Yeah, there's certainly that data is used elsewhere, but usually they're grabbing the whole enchilada from the FTP download rather than using the service.
But FWP is not expressed interest in developing an app.
They have, well, I don't know about now, but they have their hunt planning tools.
Yeah.
They do.
Use our personal.
And they do.
player.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just drink. It's like 3 water bottles.
It's a system.
Yeah, I don't know which one's yours.
I think mine was on the table.
Okay, then mine must be this one. Sorry.
Well, I was going to move things around, but I will, we'll just keep going with the Network Advisory Council report.
So one of the changes with some of the reorganizational structure is that, like I chair the Land Information Advisory Council, I'm also now chairing the Network Advisory Council with heavy staff support from both Tracy and Kara. And I think it'll lend some parity to how we talk about these advisory groups. And so I think that makes a lot of sense. The Advisory Council had their regular August retreat last week. One of the things that we emphasized for this retreat was meeting in person. We did not offer an online meeting option because we wanted people to be able to interact face-to-face, to have some more engagement. And I think that worked fairly well. We had good attendance from most of the attendees, and it really did, I think, lead to better dialogue. We spent some time doing some evaluation and reporting on our current work tasks, and then we talked about effective engagement from the Network Advisory Council, and they gave us some good feedback on some things that will be useful to them going forward. Specifically, we talked about having in our orientation better information about the history of the Network Advisory Council and the history of a lot of our collaborative programs. There's a pretty steep learning curve for people coming in that don't necessarily have the history of the kinds of things the NAC has worked on, the history of the different projects that they're working on. Of course, funding availability and availability for new project ideas also drives engagement. I think that will be helpful as we think about the work of the Network Advisory Council. We were very clear with the Network Advisory Council that level of engagement is necessary and requested from the Commission in order to feel like you are getting the best possible advice from the Network Advisory Council on our various priorities. So in addition to that kind of evaluative work, a number of the things we talked about are reflected in the work plan priorities. So the cost share formula is an important work task for us to think about. Staff describe or the Montana Library to Go RFPs, and from that effort, staff are now working with volunteers from the Network Advisory Council and identifying members of the library community from the different sectors to help serve on work groups that will be a part of developing those RFIs. Similarly, as I described earlier, we have Network Advisory Council members who will be helping us with the economic development solicitation and that work going forward. Another focus area that Tracy and Amelia are working on are programming ideas around the roles that libraries play in civil discourse and civic engagement. And the need from staff is to help narrow the focus of those topics. When you just say civil discourse and civic engagement broadly, that means many things to many people and can take many different shapes depending on the community and the roles and interests of the library. And so the work of the Advisory Council is helping our staff to provide some concrete definition about what those programs should focus on to help the staff develop those kinds of resources that will be most helpful to libraries, and also developing the partners like Humanities Montana that can help make those efforts more effective. So we have a number of to-dos coming out of the Network Advisory Council meeting that are again shaping the work plan. Bruce continues as the commission representative to the Network Advisory Council. Don't know if you have anything else that you wanted to add specifically.
It was a good meeting. It was the best meeting of recent years. People were engaged. People took some chances. There was real conversation and some real trust. I think that what I heard from it is if we give them real work, we give them real choices to make, not just one person made that point, which I thought was a brave thing to do, is that don't just tell us what you want us to give you a thumbs up or thumbs down on. Give us some choices. I think that we will continue to need to work on raising expectations of engagement. And I think that the face-to-face made a huge difference. Basically it means giving them real power, giving the Network Advisory Council a real genuine ability to take and advise the state library as to stuff that may or may not be what we would have thought of as a commission or what staff would have thought of, but from kind of this grassroots kind of stuff. And I think that we'll continue to see a positive arc in terms of the quality of the work that the NAC is able to do. I came away really encouraged, personally.
Okay, thank you guys. We have one more update, the Trust for Montana Libraries update.
Jamie, do you want to
Wanna
add?
start and I'll add, or?
Sure, sounds good. We had the last meeting of the Trust for Montana Libraries Board at the end of June. The focus now is really shifted to working on a development plan and finding capacity building funds to help the contract and the trust move forward. We have extended the contract with Library Strategies from the end of September through the end of December. We're not adding any additional funds to the contract, just giving them more time to complete that work. So we'll continue to work with them through the end of the calendar year. There's a number of different trusts and organizations that they've brought some resources in and are working with members of the board to identify contacts to really begin to do that kind of fundraising work, including the Northwest Area Foundation, the MJ Murdoch Foundation, and some of those other kinds of large funders. One of the needs that we have between the State Library and the Trust is to begin to develop a draft agreement of the expectations of the two bodies and how we work together organizationally. One of the questions, for example, is whether or not the Trust might act as a fiduciary agent for grants that require us to work with a nonprofit, and whether or not that would be an appropriate role for the Trust to take on. The draft document that's in your materials was drafted by Library Strategies, so it's being considered by the board of the Trust. It's here for your discussion as well as a draft, and similar to other kinds of policies, we would ask you to take action on that in October when you're comfortable with it. But now is a time for us to continue to refine and ask questions about that working relationship.
would the workflow, the trust has $1 million to disperse this year. So, would they have any say in how that money was spent?
It would have to be spent in accordance with their
MOU.
Their mission and this document, this agreement.
And who decides? What is the State Library Commission's role in deciding how that $1 million is spent?
That's for us to determine in the MOU that we
That's what I
establish.
thought.
With
That's
them.
why I asked.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a reference to the state librarian in the draft. And I was wondering if you were anticipating perhaps that the state librarian would act as kind of the go-between between the two boards. State librarian wouldn't dare spend all that money on a trip to Bermuda, and the trust wouldn't dare abrogate.
Right. And I think, serving as ex officio on that board and being able to be that go-between and ensuring that we continue to have a commissioner represented on that board in the same capacity is important.
I thought in the draft it was not as clear as it might be if we were trying to communicate this with the library community.
If you have recommendations.
I don't. I don't. I just was curious. I saw all the work that went into it. It wasn't clear to me.
So one of the things I saw that I know we've talked about in the past about securing funds is the number one state library responsibility is applying for for grants. And I know that some of the Montana-wide things that we'd like to do, the people who are working here at the library are not allowed to write those grants. So so they're getting federal funds for their positions, so they're not necessarily spending that time writing more grants. I know it's mainly the not advocacy, but the it's advocacy is the wrong word.
Conflict of interest, sort of.
Yeah, not conflict. So.
You're saying if they're being paid by LSTA, they can't use the time
Those
period
funds to,
extending
yeah.
Being paid by LSTA to apply for grants.
Mm-hmm. I think that was something we had talked about before.
Which is why we established the trust.
Mm-hmm. But that's the number one responsibility for the state.
There are parameters under which they can apply for grants.
Mhm.
It has to be tied to specific LSTA projects. So Amelia, for example, applies for grants and gets grant funds.
Okay.
We have a grant right now from NASA to help with some astronomy-related tools and resources tied to the summer reading program. She's applying for other kinds of grants from different kinds of organizations. So we do have some ability to do that.
Okay.
And she was specifically interested in applying for grants where the fiscal agent needed to be a nonprofit, not a government agency. And so that would be an opportunity for this trust to act as fiscal agent. I'm sure they would take some overhead from the grant to do that work.
So who's going to conduct the audit, the annual audit?
Of the trust?
Yeah.
They will.
They will, okay. I just don't see that. The trust will.
The trust will conduct an audit on itself.
Well,
The
accountant.
They'll pay
nonprofits
for it.
can do that, yeah. I mean, no, they
would-
hire an auditor.
Right.
Yeah.
It's their pocketbook.
But yeah, the state library won't be auditing.
Okay.
The trust, I think that was your question.
Can I ask just a clarification on what Eric was asking? Because I'm not reading this as it's our number one responsibility
It's
to go and apply for grants.
first thing.
But when it comes to the relationship between the library and the trust, it's the library's responsibility, not the trust's responsibility to apply for grants. Is that what it's intended to
Okay.
convey?
Yep.
So my understanding is that the group of librarians in the East did sort of a challenge and raised some $4,000 or something.
Between 3 and 4. Yep.
I would just put a bug in the trust ears that there are other bodies that might be welcome to having a challenge, and it might be the timing might be good as sort of leading the charge.
We talked about that at the trust meeting.
Yep.
We had a really good discussion at the last meeting, where the group that was here, which is kind of varied, brought in different entities that were potential funding Northwest Area Foundation. It was a robust discussion of opportunities for either getting grants or financial input. So it was a positive meeting, I thought. Who? Commissioners? Like you and me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was thinking commissioners. Like I live in another world. It's county commissioners. Like, no, they have no money. But,
I mean, and
Bruce, will you give us some money for the trust?
yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. How much? A couple hundred? 1,000?
And I think one of the things that, I guess in my mind, what the trust is to be a bit of a fundraising arm, but none of their responsibilities necessarily outline that they're actively fundraising, and it's concerning to me. So, and I could be completely off base, but that's what I thought we needed the trust to be.
No, that's exactly what they are. It's a good point. Back.
And I think that's why the applying for grants stood out, that's our responsibility at the state library, when I didn't feel like they're managing money, but they're not necessarily going after, maybe it's something about private funds or, you know.
It may be, and I would need to check with Stu Wilson on this, that this document is more about that fiduciary agent role and less about when they raise funds, what is that relationship with the state library to fund different kinds of projects and programs.
That
But
makes
that's a good-
sense. Yeah.
That's a good question to bring back to Stu.
Yeah, no, that confused me too. I didn't understand the delineation of duties, but then the title is says fiduciary agent agreement, so it's not a delineation of duties outside of that one scope.
So I think the question for them is, how do we articulate that point, that they are fundraising, and that they are raising funds to support program priorities that are identified in concert with the state library. We want to make sure that we're comfortable with that relationship.
I assume at some point that it would be given to an attorney in the state to make sure that we're making an agreement that
Yep.
doesn't land us in jail.
Well, thank you guys. It's a lot of work. It's happened really quickly. I appreciate it. So the next item is to talk about and in any of the
We don't have timelines, as you know, but in our drafting of the budget, we're still targeting the same dollar amount, which was $14,000. That was more than adequate for the amount of travel that you undertook this last year with coming to meetings, sending Ken to NISJIC. You all attended the Montana Library Association conference and attended the American Library Association in Washington, D.C. So that budget remains adequate. It's helpful for us to have direction from the commission about the priority events that you want commissioners to attend, so that we are getting those budgets approved and the out-of-state travel documents approved for those. There will be National Library Legislative Day again in May this year, so I hope a commissioner will attend that. We also have Kenny, who's attending the Ripple conference in October, and so those costs are actually covered through a grant from the Colorado State Library, so that won't be hitting the commission's travel budget.
Those being both Ripple and the National Legislative Day? Or
Just Ripple, yeah. The costs associated with Ripple.
And am I the only commissioner going this time?
I believe so. And then, of course, there's the Federation meetings that we need to talk about.
It strikes me that we should be thinking about Mako, and I'm not sure who else as important partners that we should engage with whom we should engage.
The Mako conference is in September. Is it the third week in September?
Second.
And so we'll have a booth there. We'll have sessions there. If you want to send a commissioner there.
I'm going, but I'm going as a vendor, so it's probably not appropriate to go as a commissioner.
Where is it?
Great Falls.
Great.
I can't go, I drink too much when I'm with those people. I can't do that again. But we don't know the date. You said it's the second week?
Yeah, it starts the same as NISJIC. I think it's the 8th or 9th. No, that's not. That's true. It's later than 20.
That's
right month there.
Is it when the trust is?
I'm not
20,
sure.
22nd through 26th. Yeah.
I'm not sure the conference is necessarily the venue. It might be a working meeting, or there might be something else. I don't know what it would be.
And perhaps that goes into our work plan.
Yep. As we think about those partners. Yep. Good.
The other place might be when local government center does their training sessions. Get on that agenda.
Get a calendar from them and get on that.
I'll see Paul LaChapelle on the 24th.
Okay.
We have Baroque music coming to White Sulphur Springs.
Oh, wow.
Lovely. They fix it, don't broke it.
Michael Fashway and I are giving a presentation to APCO, the public safety officials, on sort of the statewide roll-up, next gen stuff. That's in October.
I'm going to Broad Valleys. Should we sign up for?
Let's go ahead and talk about Federation meetings if you don't mind.
On September, just looking at what's going on, is the MLIAC meeting is on the 11th. Public Library Standards Task Force is on the 13th. In Golden Plains, which is in Wolf Point, is anyone available to go?
Well, I'm planning on going to the MLIAC meeting.
Okay.
Is that true? I'm also planning on going to the Public Library Standards. With your assent.
And you're the representative on those, are you?
I guess I am. Well, and that's just as well I'm going.
Is anyone able to make it to Wolf Point on the 26th?
It's Thursday. We usually wean on Thursdays. Sorry.
And how about South Central and Big Timber on the 28th?
Saturday?
Yes.
I can do that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Jamie.
What's the one right before that you mentioned?
The Golden Plains, the 26th.
Tracy, will that
was in
have an
Wolf Point.
online option, the meeting in the Golden Plains Federation?
I could ask about doing that.
Okay. Would a commissioner be able to attend online if that option were made available?
Which day?
I think the value in its being there and letting them see your smiling face. I have to say, though, that it was an awful long way to drive for a 3-hour or 2.5-3-hour meeting without a lot of substance. Just to be very frank, and we're being recorded. I apologize. But seriously, which may be an issue we have with face-to-face meetings generally.
There's a slight chance I got to go up on the High Line. There's a slight chance I might be able to do that. It's a little iffy because it's right after Mako.
Waiting for friends conflicts with Mako.
It does, but I'm not staying for Thursday.
Oh, okay. So
But I don't know if I could want to drive from Great Falls to Wolf Point in one day.
We drove there one day from here.
From here.
It was okay.
I got to go up that way anyway.
Except
Are
for
we
snowing.
talking about September 26th?
Yeah.
I can go if it's online. Was that your question? Was that the question? Okay.
Let's see if Ken can go in person.
Okay.
It's a good group. It is a long way.
It's a great group. It's a
'Cause
great group.
I got to go to Scobie sometime in that time frame, so it's not that much
What
different.
would improve things for us United Commissioners is if they actually had something for us to do that was helpful at the meeting, rather than just sit there and grin and eat donuts. Although I'm good about both of those. but seriously, I mean, it's a big ask for anyone to drive any place in the state if you don't have real work to do.
Which one is it?
That's the Golden Plains.
This is Bruce Frank, being Frank. It's a new Frank Bruce.
Well, that might be something we can communicate with our federation, with the heads of each federation. How can you better utilize the commission during your meetings? And just put that back on them. What do they need of us? Do they just want to see our smiling faces, or do they want us to do something? And I think being frank is good, because you're not going to get a frank answer if you don't give them a frank response. So, in the federations, what do they need of the commissioners during the meetings?
I think Broad Valleys does a great job, but that particular federation has made the commitment to offer enough continuing education so that the trustees could potentially certify with the trustee track. And so it just seems like there's a lot of continuing ed programs, and the state library will call on the commissioners regularly for input statewide. So it's not necessarily that they've carved out a particular role for the commission, but they're very aware of, when you've been to Broad Valleys before, they're very aware of when commissioners are there and they'll look to them and say, how is the rest of the state doing this, or something like that. So it just happens very organically. I think they do a great job.
Tracy, remind me the date for the Broad Valleys, because isn't it also that last week of September?
It's the 22nd.
20.
I believe it's 10 a.m. and it is a go-to meeting.
Yeah, it's there. And that's the other thing that they've done is one a year is on phone. And that's how they're able to offer so much quality continuing education, because they're meeting in person 1 year and people show up for that.
It's an in-person or it's a call-in, you said?
This second one is the call-in, yeah, this one.
Okay.
This one is the call-in.
Okay, because it's not on the calendar.
That was one that was just got
And
scheduled.
Tamarack,
Okay.
that's a call-in, correct?
In the fall,
Tamarack's
yes.
the call-in, yeah, in the fall.
And I'm planning on doing that one.
Okay, Ken, you're going to do Tamarack.
I can make the October 4th meeting.
That's good.
And I'm sure everyone has on their calendars that we did switch to October 4th for our commission meeting in White Sulphur Springs. We already talked about Ken going to the regional Ripple. I think you're going to enjoy that. Ken will attend the Tamarack Call on October 16th. I believe I'll be able to go to the Pathfinder meeting in Fort Benton. would anyone be available for Sagebrush in October on the 26th in Miles City?
That's another one I might tentatively try to. Because I also got to go to the southeast part of the state.
Yeah.
Are you thinking about going there?
Yeah, well, I got to talk to Robin when she gets back, but yeah, I've got to go in the fall there too at some point.
Okay.
Well, we always look at the calendar at our meetings, so
Yeah.
we'll revisit that
We'll
in
revisit that.
October.
Give me a whistle if you are not able to.
Yeah.
Tracy,
What time does the Golden Plains meeting usually held?
They usually start at 10 a.m. and then they go until about noon and then have lunch together. I believe all of the federations that meet in person are doing a crisis intervention training. Librarians requested online so that their meeting will be a little longer.
What time you walked into that at Tamarack? When the guy was doing that.
It's really the only possibility I have of attending, but I have a phone call meeting at noon. So if it would be okay for me to attend just 2 hours of the meeting face to face, I could probably go.
Why don't you and Ken coordinate?
Duke it out.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like, yeah, that's fine. It sounds like you're headed out to the eastern part of the state again at the end of October, right?
Yeah, in that framework, or that's a possibility anyway. Yeah, so I'll coordinate with you.
Okay, I'm doing Big Timber the 28th.
Yep. Specifically with regard to the commission meeting on the 4th, we do have a block of hotels the night of the 3rd. And in the past, sometimes when we've traveled like this, we've held some kind of reception at the local library the night before. Is that something that would be of interest to any of the commissioners?
Sorry, what day?
I'm coming in.
That
the
would be
night
the
before.
evening of the 3rd of October 3rd.
I'm coming in the night before. I was figuring on at least attending. I'm a fancier dogs,
Mm-hmm.
basset hounds, and I was going to go to the local basset establishment. I thought.
Geez, I might even be pouring beer that night.
Aren't we all gonna be there the evening of the 3rd?
I was
Could
gonna
be
drive
fun.
in, but I could figure out how.
It's a good chance to get into hot water.
Yeah. That's where we're staying.
I'll be there.
Okay. All right.
So you're coming in on the 3rd, and we have the 4th. Marlis, you and I will, you're the one that plans this sort of stuff, like meals and that kind of stuff.
I have it on the calendar to plan lunch, and I can get hold of you and talk about what options and
Yeah,
stuff.
and we can do something on the 3rd.
Are you set
Those of you that come in.
I will allow Jenny to take charge of that one. Well, unless she tells me to.
Yeah.
So we're having a reception the night of the 3rd at
Yeah.
the library?
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't talked to Jessica. I wanted to get your sense first and make sure you guys were going to be there. But if that works, we'll see what we can coordinate.
All right, are there any other pressing items on the calendar?
Is anyone planning on going to district? It'd be great.
What?
It's a fairly big commitment, several days, but this is probably as accessible as it'll ever be, being in Salt Lake City.
What is this?
What is it?
National States Geographic Information Council. You get a lot of exposure to all of the, national, state level work of GIS communities.
And it's September 22nd.
22nd through 27th, or something, 22nd. It's mainly Monday through Friday. And even if you could commit to that much, you'd have to figure out the timing on flights to make it most worthwhile, but just to get to the middle of the days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is the bulk of
I'm interested in going in the mid-year. I didn't go to this one because Michael's going, and also because the Mako was the same time. But
Yeah.
Yep.
But I agree, it's a great meeting. It's 38 or so of the states, GIOs and stuff, and it's well worth it. You don't get any sleep, but the social ends at about midnight, and the meetings start up at about 7 a.m. So.
There'll be heavy discussion of census, geo-enabled elections, LiDAR, next gen 911. All those will be.
I'd be interested in going maybe in years hence, but not this year.
I've been picking up we talked to a lot of little counties, but I've been picking up a lot of interest in geo-enabled elections, or in GIS and elections. They don't call it that, but particularly 2020 election. And I think there's more clicker recorders that are kind of interested in it.
Yeah.
If anyone else decides they're interested in NISJIC, let me know in the next couple of weeks. We're starting to arrange registration and transportation.
With this is, I guess, a little bit off topic, but I was wondering about the Mako thing, about trying to have them come to a commission meeting sometime, and when it's not in the throes of legislative issues, and just to talk about things.
Is the state library taking a band to Salt Lake?
There are varying travel arrangements to accommodate family needs and other kinds of travel needs.
It's actually at Snowbird, so it's at the ski area outside of Salt Lake.
That would be cruel.
Summertime, though, so no snow. Well, maybe not snow.
Could be harsh.
There are the slopes of green grass.
Yeah. Please enjoy it.
We did our MLA, once at Big Sky or something. Yeah, but it was even during seasons. You had to sit there and watch everybody.
Even worse.
All right, well, I'm going to move on to our last order of business, the election of new officers. I gave you guys a chance to potentially mull this over through an email after our last commission meeting. We were just at quorum, so we did not want to close the floor on that, but Anne has expressed interest in the chair position, and there has so far been nobody stepping forward for the vice chair. And are you the vice chair?
I am.
That's how much work the vice chair does. So that one's not quite as scary if someone would want to be a vice chair. But I guess just any other nominations, self or other nominations for the chair position.
Anderson, vice chair?
What are you looking at me for?
Because you're sitting right here.
Look at him.
Are you interested in vice chair?
I wouldn't mind being vice chair. I'm not interested in being chair, though.
I nominate Ken for vice chair.
All right.
Second.
Well done.
And you accept? All right, well, we'll start with the chair. Hearing no other nominations. All those in favor of Ann Kish as our next chair, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm excited.
So to make it official, all of those in favor of Ken Wall being our vice chair for the next year, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Both passed. Thank you guys so much for.
Thank you for being a very
Yes.
good chair.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Are there any other business or announcements that should be made before we adjourn?
Just a note, I'll get in touch with you hopefully tomorrow with a firm date for the online teleconference meeting we need to have at the end of the month to look at financials. And I know that Melissa wants to meet with the finance committee ahead of that to look over those financial reports, so we'll coordinate those two meetings.
Okay. Hearing no other
Our budget's exciting.
announcements, we'll end the meeting at 2:51.
Yeah. Did they do that?
Good job, Erin.
Good job.
It was very rational.